has been too long. Me and my family were enjoying the last bit of summer before everyone gets back to normal. I know last video I kind of touched on my little bits of my journey and I was gonna talk about kind of my family stuff, but I kind of got bored, honestly. Um, I have stuff on my Instagram that I've already gone through and I was going to kind of talk through that all again on YouTube. And it doesn't mean that I'm still not going to do that, but I kind of want to put a pin in that for now as far as this content goes and kind of go into a different side of my story because I think those are going to be a lot more helpful instead of kind of going through all the tedious things that I've already touched on my other space. So if you are interested in that, it's a quick reference to kind of like family timelines and stories. And again, I will talk about that in another video sometime, but it just didn't seem relevant to the connections I was trying to make here. So I actually wanted to kind of talk about what it means to step into a journey of healing because a lot of people don't talk about how hard it really is. And I kind of mentioned that throughout some of my other content about how it's difficult and no one knows and it's hard and just be prepared for the struggle. But I kind of want to break that down in more details of my personal experience. And I know everyone is different. So, again, my experience is not going to be your experience. Like 100% chance it's not going to be your experience. But I just kind of want to give you one story of what that healing journey looks like. And maybe, I would love to hear everyone else's healing journeys if they've gone on one and kind of like their struggles and like the real deal of it. Because I think it would be really cool to share other people's stories and perspective so that when other people are starting, they kind of have a roadmap and a guide to what they can be expecting or be prepared for. I know for me, when I first started to seek help, it started with realizing that I was not healthy. I could not function. I could not be a good mom, a good spouse, and a good friend or a family member. And I was just wasn't also being good to myself. And so the first step I took was finding help. And I was lucky enough to have some insurance and meet with a psychiatrist and a psychologist to kind of get me what I needed. And from those two meetings, what they did was prescribe me a regular visit to a psychologist. And then they also prescribed me medication. I started that medication sometime in 2021, and starting on that medication was really hard. It I had to, it's not like you just take a pill and feel better. It comes with a lot of side effects, and it also comes with a gradual process. You have to build up to and find the right dosage that works for you. So with starting that, it took a few months before I started even feeling normal. I was actually sick from the medication. I felt almost like I was in my first trimester of pregnancy. I would get dizzy, feel nauseous, have really bad headaches and fatigue. But despite those side effects, it actually helped me because I was so bad in every other aspect of my life. I was able to not have like anxiety spells. I don't call them attacks because they are my form of anxiety attack, but it's not like the typical person that is feeling like I guess, a panic attack where they feel like they're having a heart attack. Mine is very much like my body shuts down and kind of like shakes and feels ill and really weak. And in that lasts, quite some time. And so I was able to not do that. I was able to like have a conversation without shaking. I was able to, not feel weak and sick and not be able to be present for my kids. And so once I started feeling better on the medication, I was also, trying to find and navigate a I'm sorry, a psychologist. Um, and no one tells you that it's a game. It's not a game. It's a like you have to find the right fit for you. And no one tells you how exhausting it is to try to start over and over again with a new therapist and having to retell your story over and over again so that they know where to start with you. And that's really hard. I remember when I very first started, it was with a like I think I was trying to like find a Christian person that wasn't covered under my insurance. And so I got like the cheapest like student, which is not always a bad thing. Um, but they they like didn't remember what they told me. Like they didn't remember who I was. I kind of had to reiterate. They gave me homework and they didn't remember that we were supposed to go over it the next week. So just like when you're already in a really fragile state, like someone forgetting that things that are really important or were really hard for you to do, it's kind of disheartening and you feel unseen and not helped. And then I was, trying to utilize my insurance with the next therapist, and and it was during COVID, and it was really hard because they didn't align with my beliefs. And they were kind of telling me to do things that didn't feel right or comfortable for me, and they were like questioning my relationship, and so it was almost like they weren't there to really help me, but they were just kind of like questioning my bad decisions and like kind of almost like bad mouthing like my husband, and so that felt really weird. We tried couples therapy, and then that person was like, actually, your husband needs more help. So we're just going to do some sessions with them. So again, I felt left out again. And so it was super disheartening. So I took a break from therapists for a while. And then we moved up to Oregon, and I was finding a new therapist. And I was actually at the same time that I did, because it was once we got settled in Portland, so it wasn't right away. And so, about a year and a half after being on medication, I decided that the medication was no longer serving me, and the side effects were actually um, more harmful than helpful. And so that's when I again spoke with my primary care physician and the psychologist and psychiatrist that helped me the first time. And they put me on a plan to wean me off. So I was on the medication for about a year and a half. And then it took me probably about like 6 months to fully wean off of it. So that again was a journey. But when with that, because I knew I wasn't going to be on medication, I did pursue therapy again and tried to find the right one and learned that I could have boundaries and I could question the therapist and kind of weed out who was right and wrong for me. And thankfully, I found someone that aligned with my beliefs and that was there to help me through weaning off. And she actually thought it was really good for me to be able to process my story not on the medication, because it would allow me to feel the full emotions instead of having them kind of numbed out by the medication. I know not everyone can get off medication, and so I'm definitely not like saying like, oh, you should get off medication. Again, everyone's journey is their own. The medication served a purpose for me, and I was grateful for it, and I think I did need it, and so I'm not bad mouthing medication in any way. But it was getting to the point where the fatigue and the headaches and were starting to get in the way of me being a good parent and wife and present at work and all of that. And so that was the choice for me that fit me the best. And I did it with help and people surrounding me. like a therapist in my family. Um, and so with that, therapy was finally like a good thing. It brought me goodness and helped me through a lot of hard things. But again, this is about like the hardships of healing. And so I do want to touch on like what being in therapy and even experiencing good therapy does because um, it definitely like no one talks about like the fatigue you feel like after a session. I did my therapist walked me through some brain spotting, and so I would have like really weird dreams the next day. I'd be really really exhausted after our session. I would need a nap. And then, when you're working through boundaries and understanding things about your life and about how, like, for my example, for me is like how I was just like so overly like needing acceptance and having no boundaries and just doing anything to please, and having to actually work through that and like find my own identity and understand who I was as an individual and as a mother for who I wanted to be as a mother and a wife and a daughter and a sister and all of that. And so learning that was really difficult because it meant that you had to put boundaries up or you had to like reevaluate how you interacted with these people on the day to day, and it caused a lot of friction in a lot of my close relationships, and it almost like reignited some anxieties because I was showing me all of the unhealth I had lived in, um and how I like lived my life and how I had to like get rid of those unhealthy habits. And so that was really tumultuous time for me, honestly. It affected my relationship with my family. I would get really bad anxiety when I would see them, because for the first time, had to practice, saying what I liked and didn't like, and saying like things that bothered me and didn't bother me. And I was not used to that. I was not used to saying no, or I actually prefer not. And it's simple, normal, everyday thing to some people, but it was really, really hard for me. And so I I did that, and no one talks about not only how like that can bring anxiety, but how it can also be isolating because it is causing conflict in relationships that you thought you felt safe in before. Um, and so yeah, that was hard. And that lasted a long, I would say that period of time lasted probably a good year or so, if not more. And the thing with therapy, I will say, is I think it's super helpful and it's a great tool. And I think that if, especially if someone has gone through something, it's really helpful. But I kind of have a different perspective. Again, everyone's different. So this is my opinion. And you don't have to follow my opinion. And that's great because we're all human. We can all have different ideas. But for me, like therapy is something that's a great tool, but it's not necessary for everything in every moment in your life. And I think it's good to, take breaks from therapy. And also boundaries. I think there are times and places for certain boundaries. Everyone's life is different. Everyone's going to require different boundaries. But I think that sometimes we use boundaries as an excuse to not feel comfortable. I mean, an excuse for getting out of things that make us uncomfortable or things that we don't like. And so I think understanding when boundaries can be helpful and when they can become a hindrance or make us more selfish in a bad way. Um, and so I think it's always great to reevaluate those things and to understand what a boundary looks like and how it can change. And so, like, for example, with me, And so with therapy, I think it's all about finding balance and understanding what works best for you. Um, the next thing I want to talk about is healing in front of my children. And no one talks about how hard that is. When I grew up, everything looked perfect. My parents were perfect to me. They never fought, they never did anything wrong, they never made bad choices. I never saw them crack. I never saw them really like get emotional. I would see, anger and stress and frustration, but I would never see like fear or sadness um or stuff like that, I wouldn't see them crack. And so learning how to heal in front of my girls in a way that could show them that mommy's human and mommy cries just like you cry, and mommy has a hard day just like you, but also putting again strict boundaries of, but it's not your job to make me happy. And so, yes, I would love a hug, but also, um, you know, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about making me happy. Um, was a huge thing I wanted to reiterate over and over and over again when I was having a rough day with my anxiety or just my healing journey altogether. And so I think that was hard, is learning that it was okay to not be okay in front of my girls. And my biggest fear was traumatizing them and seeing me like as a broken person. But I think that when we can be broken in front of them, but then they see us, fighting to become healthy, they see strength in us, and it's okay. And then they know it's okay to be sad and have emotions and have hard things that they don't know how to explain or have the words for, and knowing that like it's okay to need space and it's okay to need lots of hugs and love as well. And so I think just talking through them and being transparent with them in an age appropriate way was the best way to do it. And to just be honest, and like learning to like fight well in front of your kids too, like having a disagreement with your spouse, but also letting your children see you apologize and hug and make up too is super amazing and super like, and then talking about it with them afterwards, like how did that make you feel when you saw mom and daddy like kind of get mad at each other, or like kind of bicker back and forth, or how did it feel when you when mommy was having a hard day with her anxiety and you saw her like sad on the couch, and talking through those feelings and emotions with them, and allowing them to ask questions, and giving them answers as best as we can in an age appropriate way, and then also letting them again in an age appropriate way, letting them into your your journey and kind of what got you there and the things that are hard for you. I think that it's great, and they can see that, and they can know that life is not meant to be perfect and happy and rainbow and sunshine all the time, and fighting isn't always bad. It can be productive, it can be a way to grow and learn. And so that's hard, and that's still hard even when I have a hard day, because like I said, I don't ever want my kids to like feel burdened by my burdens. And so I always probably too much be like, hey, don't worry about this, like I'm okay, um so yeah, that was difficult, and is still difficult, but good. And as they get older, it gets easier to talk about with them and for them to understand. And so those were a lot of like the mental and some of the physical things that I've went through in my healing journey. And I would say even like coming out of my healing journey, I felt like I was kind of met with this feeling at this crossroad, like I've done a lot of the work, and yes, I still have a lot of work to do, but I was left with like this, my body, the physical effects my body endured during my healing. um it's still affecting me now. I would say, like, for me, like, after being on like medication, um definitely made me gain a lot of weight. I would say even after having my kids, like, I was able to lose the majority of my baby weight, and on this medication, I was like the same weight, or I am now like the same weight I was being pregnant with my daughter. And that was a really harsh reality for me. And not to mention that, like, I feel like my hormones are messed up. I feel like I have a lot of like aches and pain and a lot of chronic fatigue, um, from not just the medication, but I think the healing journey itself. And I would compound that with like a few other things that have gone in on in my life, like getting a desk job and the pandemic and the stresses of healing have definitely like made my body hurt and makes me tired and messed up my hormones, like I said. And so I got through this journey, and I felt so, like, I would say, emotionally and spiritually healthier, but then physically I just did not, I do not feel healthy. And so that's a part where I've had to combat the lies. I think, when you gain weight, you think, oh, let me think of all the things I've done wrong. And instead, I've had to say, look at all the things my body has had to carry me through, and thanking my body um, for getting me through the really hard times and surviving, and just honoring it where it is, and also recognizing, okay, so what can we do now to love my body and to honor it and to give it the healing that it needs. And so I would say I'm definitely still on that journey, and I will touch on that more, but I did want to like introduce it because it is part of the, I think, healing journey no one really talks about, is like all all the stress and the pain that our body holds and carries along with us, and how we have to train it out of some of those fight and flight responses and remind it that it's safe. For example, like, I will have gone to an experience where, like, going back home is really hard for me. Going back to visit family in Southern California is really difficult, and my body wants to shut down and have like an anxiety response because it's trying to tell me it's not safe. And so I have to, again, this is where the boundaries come in, and why I want to talk about that a little bit more, because, like, a lot of people would say, oh, my body doesn't feel safe there, so I'm never going to go there again. And I think actually that's not necessarily the right space. I think when you can recognize why it feels that way, you can kind of show your body that, like, yes, a lot of bad things happen to me here, but just because I go back doesn't mean those bad things are going to happen again. And so it's showing up, and it's building that muscle. It's building those neurotransmitters to send a different signal and teaching it. And so, like, that's a whole different tangent, but and I didn't mean to go on it, but I just talking about like how your body holds everything and it remembers everything. And so it's, of course, it's gonna feel beaten up after, going to war and going to battle. And so when I was able to recognize that and not just beat myself up and saying like, oh, I just have all these bad habits now and that's why I'm like this. It's like, oh no, actually this happened and this happened and this happened. And those affected your bodies too. It's not just what you're putting in it. And so, yeah, that that's a hard thing that I struggle with daily and that I'm working on and still trying to heal. I talked a lot about physical and emotional effects of healing, and I haven't really touched on the spiritual side effects of healing and what it means to heal spiritually. For those who attend church or who grew up in church, that's a whole journey in itself. And I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's a very fresh wound and I don't know how to fully go through every detail in the right way because I'm not going to lie, there's some kind of scary things that I would have to talk about. And I do want to talk about that, but that's a different story. And I don't know I'll be very honest with you. I don't know how much I want to share with everybody on that story. And I will be perfectly honest that I would say I was heavily confronted with that in 2024. I could be wrong, so I might go back and fact check that later. Um, Up until most recently, I got to a place, I would say a few months ago, where I was heavily considering going back on medication because of how my body was reacting when it would go to church every Sunday. And it really scared me and it put me back into a space where I was again like on the couch, um, exhausted, napping every day, almost every day. I can't nap every day. I got work and kids, you know. Um, but yeah, napping a lot, especially during the weekend, feeling sick, having to sit out of family events, play dates, or all of that stuff because I wasn't feeling well. And so I almost went on medication again. And thankfully, I feel like I've gotten through that spell. I think there's definitely still work being done, and so I will touch on it. But I don't know how deep I go, and I don't know, um, like what that's really gonna look like, as far as like how many episodes I'm gonna do on that. But that's kind of the side effects of healing, for my journey and how it is hard, and I think it's definitely a battle, and so when you hear these things on I the reason I talk about this is because I hear so many like people on social media saying like mindfulness journals and meditations and like here's all the ways to heal yourself and blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, and then you become healthier and you can lower your cortisol and do this and that and blah blah blah. But it doesn't talk about like how much of your willpower it takes and how much of your strengths it actually takes to heal well. And so I'm cautioning in the sense of it's really hard. So just like brace yourself and know it's going to be hard, but also know it's really worth it because you come out a, a much stronger person and you'll be amazed at yourself of how strong we really are. You know, I don't want to go into a whole nother thing. And so I'm just going to say this like I grew up. This will be. I think this is gonna be my next video of just like the beliefs we grow up believing. So I grew up, and saying like, all things through Christ strengthens me, and I can do all things through Him, and only by God's strength can you do this, and it's only by His miracles. But and that's true, 100%. But I think people forget that God created us, in a way that He gives us the strength inside of us. He created us with the ability to do hard things and the abilities to change. And so, like, actually wants to see us do the hard work because he knows we can do it. He made us way stronger than we believe. And we make up so many excuses. And especially in this day and age, we find pain and discomfort, um, like almost like a bad word or poison or toxic to society, and it's the exact opposite of that. And so I just want to challenge everyone um to not be scared of how hard things can be, and be willing to, like, you know fight the good fight, fight the battle, but don't do it alone. And that's the other lie, is like we can all do it alone, or cut everyone out that's not doing you a service. You do need people. Sometimes you do need a therapist, sometimes you do need a friend, sometimes you just need your family to know, hey, I'm going through this and it's going to be hard. um I and you know Make sure you have that support when going through it, because it is hard. I'm just babbling now, so I'm gonna stop. Because I don't know what I'm talking about now. And but thank you for hearing. Again, I want to hear your stories too. I would love to hear your stories, and maybe I could, like, create a little post of, like, just different inspirational stories, or read off little stories, of everyone else's experience in an anonymous format, so that other people can hear everyone else's journey. Because I said this is just mine, and mine is probably very unique or not unique at all. And mine is very minimal. Well, I don't want to minimize what I go through, but I would say there's people that go through a lot of really difficult things. And so I don't want to minimize their stories. And so, yeah, I think that would be great and helpful for just everyone. Thank you all again, and see you next video.